Well. Here we sit, and Aaron looks like the cat that just had the budgie for breakfast. I don't know why. What could possibly have that smile, that contented, tummy full smile? What could possibly bring that on? Well, this is Leaf Talk.
I couldn't quite imagine what it could possibly be, Frank.
I have to admit, I must say, totally, that that had to be probably the most satisfying playoff game, at least game one, that the Leafs have played, because they're 2-7 in game ones. And I'm sure the two that were good were really good. But I got to say that this one, I just don't remember this iteration of the Maple Leafs doing what they did that everybody knew they had to do and did it, and had the opposition play right into the hands of the plan that had to be the plan for the Leafs.
It was certainly an interesting turn of events, especially after the way the first period opened.
Yes.
Being down 13-5 in shots, but still leading, was something that I was not expecting. It's one of those things where you just sort of look at it and go, I wasn't expecting that in the slightest. The Senators didn't look like the team that they looked like all season, and that's a team that would march into Scotiabank Arena and basically take the Maple Leafs lunch money. This was a bit of a surprise.
On the other hand, I saw it coming. I said to David Morisuti, my CFL co-host, and once in a while I do his Leaf Talk, his Leaf show, Locked On Leafs. And I said to him, the Leafs are going to have to survive what usually is the road trip 10 minutes, the first 10 minutes that you're on the road. I've seen the Leafs do that too often, where for some reason they don't get started right away, and they play like they're on the road the first 10 minutes. And I said that to him as well. And it ended up coming true. And I felt their power play had to work. And I felt that they had to ignore the BS that Ottawa was going to throw at them, because at the end of the day, Ottawa likes to try to intimidate Toronto. That's what the past few years, the games that they played against Toronto, they take runs at them. They do disrespectful stuff like, slap shot into the empty net, that kind of stuff. All that, the childish BS, right? So last night on cue, Ottawa did the childish BS that they do. And I know Ottawa fans are going to complain about the officiating. I know also you wanted to discuss that to begin with, which is the lack of discipline proved costly at the beginning of the program. And I'll say my part, and then you jump in with yours. So what ended up happening is they did things that wasn't a penalty. Well, let me see now. Cross-check to the face. I think that's a penalty. And I think slamming the guy against the boards, hitting him on the numbers, is a penalty. It always has been a penalty. And tripping somebody is a penalty. You stick your stick in between his feet, not a casual stick, but a good stick. That's always a penalty. And the one thing I didn't see a Leaf team that wanted to engage in that kind of behavior, almost to suggest that they needed to make sure that the way Ottawa played, which was predictable, was accentuated. The worst thing you can say about the Leafs was said by the Ottawa coach, and that is they sold their penalties real well. And I got to tell you, the way John Tavares chewed on that hockey stick, he did a great job giving the impression that he was getting a hockey stick across the mouth guard.
When the first penalty wasn't called until the second period, you got to kind of wonder. I mean, Stützle hit the Leaf player right in the numbers. You kind of got to call that. That's right in front of the ref. Yeah, Ridley Grieg for cross-checking, that was pretty obvious. Adam Gaudette for cross-checking, that was pretty obvious. The Leafs, of course, replied in kind. Nylander got himself a hooking penalty. That seems to happen at least once a game. Scott Laughton had 2 minutes for roughing.
No.
That was, with Brady, taking Brady off the ice, which was as far as I'm concerned, great. Lawton as a fourth liner, taking their captain off the ice in 1947 of the second period, worked out great for them. Oliver
Oh, are you talking about that set of penalties that was on the other side of the referee's Costco list?
Yeah. Well, no, this is earlier. This is at the end of the second period as opposed to the end of the third, where you saw Domi, Benoit, McMahon, Carlo, and Robertson all get 2 minutes for roughing, and that was followed by Gaudette, Highmore, Mountain Paulo, Clevin, Highmore twice apparently, Amadio all getting 2 for roughing. It looks like Highmore actually got the second rough in there, but we still ended up playing 4-on-4, which was
because the initial penalty was going to be to Toronto in that.
Okay, that makes sense.
It was going to go to Toronto, and then what happened was the extra stuff got tabulated, and unfortunately, and I think folks, you'll remember there was the 2 sets of punches to the face. He got called on both. To Ty Domi, there was the punch in the face, then another punch in the face, and then Ty Domi went away and gave him another punch in the face. So I'm looking forward to just to take this point further. Now, there is going to be an opportunity for Ty Domi to say, I apparently think there's somebody that wants to dance. If you want to dance, here I am. Unless you want to run the other way, which is what happened in that melee. You noticed how the Ottawa player, after throwing all the punches, then Domi gave him one across the jaw, and then he tried to get out of there as fast as he could.
Well, here's the thing. It was number 43, Tyler Clevin, that originally cross-checked him, and he actually punched Adam Gaudette. So, it was one of those cases of grab the nearest guy and start swinging, which, at the end of the day, allowing 2 goals a period definitely isn't the way that you want to start. And Linus Ullmark, unfortunately, did not have the greatest first playoff game that he could have with his new team.
He hasn't had a good history. He hasn't had a good history. He's like 3-8 in the playoffs.
Yeah, it's difficult, and it's going to be an ongoing concern, especially because this is their first time back to the playoffs after missing it for 8 consecutive years. So
if he can't flush it, Aaron, that's all I wanted to throw in.
Yeah, no, there's a big issue with that. I mean, he had his detractors, but he did have his backers as well. Travis Green thought that he didn't play all that badly.
Travis Green, what else is he supposed to do? Say, yeah, but goalie sucked. Now what do I do? Now what do we do? No. He did the right thing. Literally, he did the politically correct thing, which was support his goaltender, regardless of how he really felt. What I can say, and I think we can agree on this, this was one of those times that we're accustomed to when the Leafs are playing in the playoffs, right? And what we saw was role reversal. When the Leafs have played really well in a first period against an opponent in the playoffs, like get an advantage like 10-5 or 12-2 or that kind of advantage, they've been goalied. Last night was role reversal. This was a time when the Leafs offense wasn't doing well. In fact, the defense was on their heels, as were the number 1 line as well. At the beginning of the game, those first couple of shifts for Austin Matthews and company, they were stuck in their own zone, and their goaltender made enough saves. And I like the way it was described. The difference in the game, Aaron, I think, just to do a segue from goaltender and play by the 5, right, was the difference between Marner's breakaway and their captain's breakaway, Chuck's breakaway. That was the difference in the game, I think. And that was basically the transition from Toronto having a lead to Ottawa being able to get momentum and work towards taking that lead away.
Well, here's the thing. Ottawa got the preponderance of power plays during the regular season. So they're used to having calls go their way. A lot of their fans are, at any rate, and to see this team actually have to actually get called makes them there was a fundamental shift that needed to happen in between the second and third periods that never quite did. You look at the statistics that are up there, and you look at when the preponderance of penalties were taken. You can't take that many penalties. There were 6 power play opportunities for the Leafs, and they cashed in on 3 of those 6. Anytime you let the Leafs have a 500 on the power play, that is going to be a lot of trouble.
Well, the assumption, like in previous years, the Leafs have had that kind of advantage because they were always the team. Looking back historically, beyond last year, they were the team that drew a lot of penalties, and their power play they were 1 for 21 against Boston last year. 1 for 21. That's like 5%. And they weren't that last night, which is the key. Now, here's the thing about Ottawa. I love when they get the experts talking and they talk about stuff, and you watch the game with their knowledge, in your little bank. And what was talked about was that Ottawa likes to win the puck in the corners, and I like to come out and go right to the net. We heard that. That totally makes sense in the sense that if they dig really hard and work really hard to get the puck, and they get the puck and they steal the puck from you, that's a moment in time when defensively you may just decide to do something silly, like trip a guy or hold a guy or do something like that. What the Leafs did was they didn't do that. And the reason it didn't punish them is because when they did come out of the corner with the puck right to the net, they would take shots and try to take advantage of opportunities. And guess who was standing in their way? They got their way. They played the game, 5-on-5, Aaron. The Ottawa team was better than Toronto for the most part.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I can't deny that. At even strength 5v5, Ottawa was dominant. And the unfortunate thing is they didn't end up with a lot of opportunities to be 5-on-5 just because of, unfortunately, the undisciplined way that they played.
And the Leaf power play was what we all know it can be. It's not like we even though they were 50%, 3 for 6, I think it's fair to say people weren't surprised that they did that.
No, I don't think there can be any surprise to that whatsoever. Just because it's a murderer's row that the Leafs have on their power play. I mean, literally, you're looking at Nyes, Tavares, Nylander, Marner, and Matthews on the point. Then you're looking at Bobby McMahon, Max Domi, Nick Robertson, Morgan Riley, and OEL for the second power play. There's no let up there. This is
if you're the Toronto Maple Leafs, and if you're a Toronto Maple Leaf fan, the truth is your best players are guys that play the best in the middle of the ice. They do a great job of, the board play, right? They do a great job of that. But ultimately, the best work that the Leafs do is in the slot or on, in between the dots, in other words. For Ottawa, the best work they do is along the boards. So as good as the Leafs can be along the boards, it's not their clutch move as much as it is for Ottawa. And another reason why the boards are very important for Ottawa, that's usually where the physical stuff happens, right? Most of it, that's where it happens, right? Because that's where you can do it. You have a guy trapped, the boards, and then you can put him between you and the boards, and there's less room to escape any hitting. So what happens is if the Leafs don't play there and have a way of moving the game to the center, to the slot in that area, Ottawa's in trouble because that's not their game. And that's what we saw last night.
No, I can't disagree with you on that. At the end of the day, though, anytime you're giving up 6 power plays, that long and the short of it, you're going to be in trouble. I don't care who you're playing, especially dangerous against the Leafs.
Well, I'll end the part of the conversation that speaks to the power plays and just say this last thing again. If I didn't say it already, if you don't succeed on the power play, then the physical game that the other team is putting up against you becomes less licensed, if you will. So the power play now, what's going to happen is the next game, Ottawa's going to be a little more careful about how they play physically because they've learned a very important lesson. They can lose a game just on the power play and depending on their penalty killing, which isn't that good to begin with, by the way.
Yeah, no, It is what it is. I mean, they've made it here to the dance. So let's just see how far all of this takes them. That's
Aaron, talk to me about practice. And there was somebody missing at practice. Is there a concern here?
There was potentially thought that there could have been a concern. Stolars did get collided with during the first period there and had his leg driven against the post. He wasn't on the ice for the Leafs practice today, but the belief is that it's more maintenance than anything else. So Kampf, Pacioretty, and Hakanpää drew in, and Artur Akhtiamov was called up from the Marlies as the third goaltender. The Marlies themselves are about to start their playoff run on Wednesday. They'll be in Cleveland before coming home for Saturday and Sunday against the Leafs. So we'll see exactly what happens there. But yeah, Woll was in one net, Akhtiamov was in the other. Akhtiamov, sorry. But at this point here, Joseph Woll should probably make sure that he's ready to go. So
and really at this point on an off day, does the goalie who's going to be in net really need to practice? I think it's more about rest than it is about practice for the goaltender, and also maybe treatment with the back of his leg, because of the way he was pushed in the post, accidentally on purpose type thing. It's something that I think is important for the Leafs to make sure that their goaltender's in good shape. Let's talk a little bit about the CFL. I haven't had a chance to talk about the CFL. I got to talk to David about that. David Cote retired.
So Alouettes kicker David Cote has announced his retirement after 4 seasons and 52 games, all with the Alouettes. He's announced that he's going to be hanging them up. Now, he only played 4 games in 2024. He converted 10 of his 12 field goals, including a 53-yard attempt. He says, "I lived at a childhood dream when I put on the Alouettes jersey. I'll never forget my seasons and the fun with my teammates during our Grey Cup victory in 2023. I'm leaving the game with no regrets. I thank Danny Machocha and the Alouettes organization for drafting me and giving me the chance to play at a professional level." He was a 5th-round pick in the 2021 CFL draft. It feels like a really short tenure in the CFL, especially for a kicker. I don't know if you had any indication as to what he was moving on to, but I have a feeling he's moving on to bigger and better things, at least on a personal level, that wouldn't let him continue playing in the CFL.
Good for him. The Alouettes, there's always kickers out there, and with the advent of non-Canadians, non-Americans, international players are able to handle the kicking. There's a lot of really good ones. Australia has a few that have come here, and there are a lot of other soccer players that are turning into kickers. Let's talk about the offensive lineman Hunter Poncius of the Alouettes. He signs with them.
He signed through the 2026 season. He's 6'8", 318 pounds. He spent 5 seasons with the North Dakota State University Bison, appearing in 40 games. He actually helped his team capture the national championship, and he was a starter for the final game. He received the MVFC President's Council Academic Award in 2023. He also earned the MVFC Commissioner's Athletics Academic Excellence Award 4 times and was named to the MVFC Honor Roll for 5 consecutive years. So that is a big body on the front line for them. I'd be interested to see where he slots in.
Let's talk about the Riders. They sign a receiver.
Yeah, they've signed Jayden Horace. He spent 2 collegiate seasons as one of the top 10 receivers at Fort Hays State University. As a senior with the Tigers, he had 56 passes for 704 yards and 8 touchdowns in 11 games. This was following a 2023 campaign where he caught 36 passes for 579 yards and 11 touchdowns, earning Mid-American Intercollegiate Athletics Association honorable mention recognition. He spent his first 2 collegiate seasons in 21 and 22 at Allen University, where he had 83 receptions for 1,268 yards and 8 TDs over 16 games. So this is a guy with capable hands and has the ability to get the yards. And at 6'1", 180 pounds, he's going to be tough to get a hand on.
Let's talk about the Lions and their new receiver.
So they've added Joseph Skates to their training camp. He was at the 2024 training camp with the Jacksonville Jaguars and had a stint with the UFL Memphis Showboats in the beginning of 2025. He played at Iowa State from 2018 to 21. He's a teammate of 49ers quarterback Brock Purdy, so there is some lineage there and there's some history there. He got 16 receptions for 304 yards and 4 TDs in 33 games with the Cyclones before transferring to Memphis for his final 2 seasons. So good luck to him.
We got a couple of minutes left, and let's use it on the Canadian teams in the playoffs, starting with the Montreal Canadiens, who tonight play the President's Trophy champions. Well, actually, they weren't. The Eastern Division champions, the Washington Capitals.
Now, there was a 20-point difference in the standings between the two teams. But in the final 10 games of the season, Washington went 4-6-0, and the Habs went 7-1-2 down the stretch. They lost DC lost 4 of the 6 games that they played after Alex Ovechkin beat Wayne Gretzky's goal scoring record. The question here is, could they potentially be cold coming into this against Montreal? The other question that you have to look at is, will Sam Montembeault be up to the challenge of stopping Alex Ovechkin from his office at the right face-off dot? If he struggles, Jacob Dobas, will be waiting in the wings. He's got a .909 save percentage, but no NHL playoff experience. So there's a couple of questions there.
But a good goaltender.
Oh, for sure.
I think the biggest thing that you can say about Montembeault is that will Washington be able to flip the switch on? A. B. Can they undo the damage that finishing so high in the standings tends to create an opportunity for an underdog to surprise a team that should win? We've seen that over the years repeatedly. It's not something that's unusual in the National Hockey League. A 20-point difference is like a 4-1 lead.
Yeah, it can disappear pretty quickly if you're not careful.
So you got to be careful if you're the Leafs and you have a 4-1 lead. That's something that Washington has to worry about. Now, the Canadians have brought in a guy who's a young gun. He had like Matthews, he had an outstanding first game. Unfortunately, his outstanding contribution to the team didn't lead to a win, much like what happened with Matthews the first time he played. So we'll see how this kid plays against Washington in the playoffs. Now, I don't know much about the KHL. I'll be the first to admit that. Have I watched a full game? No, I haven't watched a full game of KHL. Do I understand how the game's played in the KHL? Can I look at that game and the way they play it and compare it to the National Hockey League? No, I can't. The best I can do is watch European hockey and assume the KHL is a lot like European hockey. Well, the smaller rink in the National Hockey League and the way teams are manned in the National Hockey League means that skating around is really cool. But unfortunately, especially in the playoffs, space and time is limited. And the only thing I can say about space and time being limited, sometimes knowing something's going to happen is limited too, because you're going to get crushed. The rules are a little more relaxed in playoff hockey, and that's something I'm wondering how he's going to deal with that. And I can't see Washington not going to that well with this guy. And in fact, with the smaller Montreal Canadiens, I can't see Caulfield, basically spending some time on his behind wondering what hit him. And we both know there's one guy in particular on the Washington Capitals who should have a warning sign over his head. And he will be hunting. And Washington has a couple of players that go hunting. And in the playoffs, hunting is legal to a degree.
Well, and that's something that Montreal is going to have to be very aware of. With Arbor Xhekaj sitting out the last 5 games of the season, it's unlikely that St. Louis is going to have him draw in. Gooley might have to contend with Wilson at this point, even though Arbor Xhekaj would technically have a weight advantage on him. It's getting Xhekaj back up to speed after having sat out for that many games. So
are we sure he won't play, or is that just you're assuming because he hasn't played in a while that they won't put him in and do it?
It's more a question of making sure he doesn't have too much ring rust on him is really the issue here.
And I think it makes very, very good sense that in your first game of the playoffs, if you're going in with the playoffs with a lineup that's doing really well and winning a vast majority of your games, you're going to go in with that lineup. It's just silly not to, right? The change can happen after you lose. But when you're on a streak, keep pumping that till that little that little advantage that you have disappears. And then at that point, Jack Eye can be brought in, or anybody else that the Canadians feel will help give the team a better chance of winning. So tonight, the key for tonight is, I think, in this case, I can't see, Aaron, Washington not coming out of the chute in a hurry.
Yeah, no, they're going to be coming out all guns blazing as far as I can see here. The situation in goal, however, is going to be a little bit trickier. Logan Thompson and Charlie Lindgren both split goaltending duties. Thompson had the better record. I mean, he was 31-6-6 with a .910 save percentage, while Lindgren was 20-14-3. Problem is Thompson is currently injured. So there's no availability. I haven't seen any ability as to whether or not he'll be available to start the season.
Even if he was, he's not been very good lately. He's and this is during the regular season. And Logan Thompson, he doesn't have a deep history in the playoffs either, if I'm not mistaken. So there's that as well, right?
Yep. And the real key at this point, obviously, for everybody who's watched the games, knows that you're going to have to ISO on Ovechkin and shut him down. Now, the Capitals are the far older and much more experienced team.
Mm-hmm.
They do have a more recent Stanley Cup than the Montreal Canadiens. But the Habs are going to have to be on their best behavior if they want to try to make it through.
Put it this way, Leaf fans, if you care about the Montreal Canadiens, you can give a little let's say a little survey, fill out a survey for Montreal fans. And I think you've got a Washington team that's very similar to the one that met the first rendition of the Core 4 Maple Leafs. And those Core 4 Maple Leafs, they learned a very important lesson at the hands of Washington. They played really well against Washington, but Washington did what veterans do. They play the right way, and they don't panic, and they take advantage of the opportunities that come and use their experience to know what to expect in a playoff game, something the Leaf players at that time had to learn. And Montreal is going to be in the same place those Leaf fans, or Montreal fans will be in the same place the Leaf fans will be. They're going to wonder, can we beat this team that's so good? That's eventually what's going to happen before the game starts.
The good news is the Montreal is throwing it back at Washington and really playing up the underdog angle. So that is
goaltending, Montembeault. Look at what happened with the Leafs last night. Actually, Montreal's going to have to hope for the best, that they weather the storm early. The goaltender plays really well, keeps the other team off the scoreboard. They get the first goal and put the game in Montreal's driving, put them in the driver's seat. That's what Montreal has to hope. Now, that's not to suggest that anybody who takes the lead might lose the lead and lose the game. That's quite possible too. Comebacks work. They work in hockey. But the first chance Montreal has to get control of this game is if they score first, in my opinion.
No, they have to be out of the gate fast. They have to jump on Washington extremely quickly in order to make sure that they're on top.
And how about the Jets? And Connor was amazing. I loved watching this game. It reminded me, it was great to be the first game that I watched in the playoffs, because it reminded me of how slow playoff hockey can be, how much of a grind it can be. And this game was a grind early. It got a little looser a little later, but it really was a grind. And everybody was kind of, I don't know, Aaron, did you watch the game?
I caught some of it. It just seemed like there was a real feeling out process that was going on more than anything else.
There was. It was that way. It was a game that it wasn't as predictable. It was like, we're not going to make the first mistake. That's what it looked like to me. We're not going to make the first mistake.
Yeah. And, with Kyle Connor's one-timer with just over a minute and a half remaining to snap that tie, I think that could potentially be a backbreaker for the Blues. Well, I know they're on the road. I know it's only the first game, but something like that and the overall performance that Connor put in, he had a pair of assists as well, is one of those things where it sort of makes you sit back and wonder. I believe that the Jets are for real this year, and they are. They could potentially be the standard bearer for the Canadian teams when it comes right down to it.
I said that. That's what I believe. I believe the best shot at winning the Stanley Cup out of the chute is the Winnipeg Jets. They are the best prepared team to win, and not just because they finished first, but because they finished first overall and the way they did it with really sound defense. They got a great defense. They got a goaltender, and they got goals they can score. They got players that can score goals. So for now, they still are, until St. Louis beats them, they're the Canadian team with the best shot at winning the Stanley Cup. The other team that has a really good shot at winning the Stanley Cup has to overcome okay, I'm going to say it right out. It's a disappointing season. The Edmonton Oilers had a disappointing season in the perspective that they finished in the Stanley Cup final last year, and this year they look nothing like the team that made it to the Stanley Cup final. They've got a lot to prove, Aaron.
Yeah, they had a lot of injuries this season, including to key players, especially late in the stretch run. It didn't help that LA went 8-2-0 in their last 10, while the Oilers only went 7-3-0. This is actually, funnily enough, the fourth year in a row that these teams are meeting, and the Oilers won the last three. Now, despite that, the Oilers are still positioning themselves as the underdogs in this particular case, and they are technically speaking the underdogs because they placed lower in the standings than the Kings did. Absolutely. But every single year, it's been an absolute battle.
I'm looking here at the lineups. Now they've got a yield sign on Trent Frederick because he's hurt, and they have other players that they can put in, and many of them haven't played yet this year. They're depending on players who have not and are not in the lineup and haven't been in the lineup all year.
No, this is very true. I mean, based on the lines as reported this morning, Vasily Podkolzin doesn't have a lot of playoff experience. Matthias Janmark doesn't have a lot of playoff experience. That's bolstered by Corey Perry on the right-hand side with Adam Henrique. You've got Skinner with Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. But yeah, one of the question marks, and I'm reasonably certain he's going to be in, is going to be Trent Frederick. I know he's listed as day-to-day and as a game-time decision, but odds are more than likely he's going to be back. Evander Kane still isn't available. Should be by the second or third game of the playoffs. So we'll have to see how that goes.
And he is a guy that can make a difference. Right now he's on the IR. And the guy they're going to miss the most, Aaron, is Matthias Ekholm. He's the guy they're going to miss. He's the anchor of their defense. And without him, that defense, there's a trickle-down effect or a trickle-up, whichever way you want to put it, to replace his kind of minutes and his kind of leadership on the back line means that somebody who usually just has to, be slotted in somewhere underneath how good he can play now has to play in that level, and everybody has to move up that one slot. So that's the part. And defense, you and I both know in the playoffs, that's a very key component.
And I mean, Matthias Ekholm has been fighting illness and injury since the beginning of March. He finally came back shortly after March 18th, and then next thing you know, he was out March 27th, and then he was considered day-to-day on April 9th, and finally, in the last game of the season against San Jose, he's out again. Supposedly going to be missing at least the entirety of the first round of the playoffs, which is a bitter pill to swallow.
That hurts. That really hurts. And then we come to finally, to close out the show, talk about the Edmonton Oilers goaltending. Stuart Skinner has been a really good goaltender for them, just not recently.
Yeah, this is of a difficult position that they find themselves in, because the other goalie that they've got back there is Calvin Pickard, who, while he did win a Calder Cup, that was 7 years ago. He's unfortunately, it looks like he's kind of stuck in perpetual backup status. But as so often happens in the playoffs, these players very often get thrust into the limelight where they can absolutely shine.
Absolutely. So, well, this was like, oh, sorry. Go ahead. Finish what you're going to say.
I'd like to see Pick show out. Watching him and I'd like to see him show out.
There goes the Marley effect. There's the Marley effect. Look at that Marley smile. By the way, good luck to your Marlies. I think, is it today they start the playoffs or tomorrow?
Wednesday they're starting the playoffs.
Okay, they start on Wednesday and they're playing Cleveland, right?
As far as I'm aware, yes, they are playing the Cleveland Monsters.
Best of 5.
Yes.
So that'll be interesting, and that all happens at Coca-Cola Coliseum for the first 2 road games, because they're the visiting, they're the team. They're not the home ice. They don't have home ice. So the 2 home games that they have after, I guess, what do? They do 2 at the visit be at their place, and then 3 in a row in Cleveland. Is that how they do it?
It actually goes 1, 2, 2. So Thursday, April 24th is the first game at 7:00. That is at Cleveland, and then games 2 and 3 are Saturday, April 26th, and Sunday, April 27th at Coca-Cola Coliseum.
Well, I need to know as well, because it seems Aaron doesn't show up when he has one of those games.
Well, it's unfortunate. But,
I'm busting you. I'm throwing you under the bus, buddy.
I appreciate that, sir.
Okay, he's Aaron William Freeland. I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. This has been a Leaf Talk. Thanks for watching, everybody. Really appreciate you tuning in. And don't forget us on Candid Frank Stanisci, 10:30 on YouTube. Have a great day, everybody. Enjoy the hockey tonight. Montreal fans, good luck.